Chapter 7. The mood around Pride Rock was even more somber than it had been earlier in the day, before the dwarf mongoose had come bearing news about Rafiki's vision and another Simba sighting. There were whispers among the other cubs, who had all been away during Sarabi's outburst. For once, Nala's opinion was in demand among them, as she was the only cub who had witnessed it all first paw. So she just won't look for Simba anymore? Puleng asked. Nala shook her head. She told the mongoose that she doesn't want to receive any further reports. The other cubs remained quiet, even Ola, whom Nala had been expecting to make some kind of nasty remark. Does this mean that Scar will be the king of Pride Rock forever? Bantu asked. No. Eventually Kamari will take his place as king, Kahina said. At least I think that is what will happen, since Kamari is Kito's son and Kito is Sarabi's sister. They continued with their discussion about the line of succession, but Nala didn't participate. For one, she hated when there was talk of anyone other than Simba leading their pride. More important, Nala wasn't ready to give up hope just yet. Not after hearing the location of this latest sighting. Ever since she'd first heard zebras at the waterhole recounting all the glorious things they had seen on their migration, Nala and Simba had talked about leaving Pride Rock and going on a grand adventure. They wanted to experience the rushing waterfalls of Rosumo and run across the sand dunes in Napaget. But of all the places they dreamt of going, Garamba was the one they talked about the most. Its lush tropical forests, rushing rivers, and massive grasslands, surrounded like the best playground a cub could ever want to live in. It was the reason Nala had always dismissed news of other sightings that had been brought back to them these last 6 months, because she knew that if Simba had somehow survived the violent wildebeest stampede that day in the gorge, and for some reason had not returned to Pride Rock, the only other place he would have traveled was Garamba. Hearing that the mongoose had mentioned Garamba, the place she and Simba had promised to visit had more than piqued her interest. Together with the other tidbit that had been reported just a few minutes prior, that Rafiki had seen Simba not merely in the jungle but in a cave, it was all but confirmed for her. It had to be the Blue Grotto. Once they'd heard about Garamba, she and Simba had set out to learn everything they could about the forest. The one place all the animals talked about most enthusiastically was the Blue Grotto. By all accounts, it was one of the most beautiful places in all Africa. It had to be more than just a coincidence that Rafiki's vision and this latest sighting both pointed to the same place. Could Simba really be there? Nervous excitement made the fur on the back of Nala's neck stand on end. Just the thought of what it would mean if Simba was truly alive was enough to make her want to run around in a circle and shout for joy. Instead, Nala kept her expression as somber as the others. She could not share her thoughts with any of the other cubs. Not yet. No one knew of her and Simba's secret dreams of visiting Garamba. They would accuse her of trying to get Sarabi's hopes up when their queen had already stated that she no longer wanted to pursue clues about Simba. It was the last thing Nala wanted to do. Sarabi had suffered enough. Later that night, Nala lay in the crook of her mother's foreleg. Several of the other lionesses had once again gone on a hunt, and this time Kahina and Ola had been allowed to go with them as part of their reward for winning the hunting games. They had now graduated to another level in their training. Nala had been upset, but only for a moment. She had more important things to think about than hunting. Like what, if anything, she should do about this latest Simba sighting? That was the first question. Should she do anything about it? Should she say anything at all? She had considered going to Sefu or Quito, but she was just too unsure of what their reaction would be. Now that Sarabi had made her desires known, Nala was almost certain that the lionesses would shut down any talk about further pursuing what the dwarf mongoose had brought back to them. There had been too many false leads already, And just because she and Simba had talked about visiting Garamba one day, it wouldn't be enough for a reason for the lionesses to believe it would lead to anything at this time. Maybe she shouldn't believe it either. This was probably just like all the other sightings. Some lion cub who was Simba's age and who had been separated or banished from his own pride. That's what all the other reports of news had turned out to be. She was already looked upon with scorn by many in her pride. How much worse would it be if she were to give them false hope, only for it to turn out that Simba wasn't in Garamba at all, after all? But what if she went to find him on her own? A jolt of eager excitement shot through her, shaking her entire body. "Nala, go to sleep," her mother admonished in a drowsy voice. Nala settled back into the crook of her mother's leg, but she could not settle her suddenly racing thoughts. What if she went in search of Simba and was able to bring their pride's true king back to Pride Rock? She would be seen as a hero instead of Seraphina's sheltered little baby cub. But this was so much bigger than just her. This would impact their entire pride. How different would life around here be if Simba ruled Pride Rock instead of Scar? The first thing he would do would be to run the hyenas off. The Pride Lands would go back to being the verdant home they had all enjoyed before everything changed. Her mother and Sarabi would go back to being the friends they had once been, as they would have no cause to fight anymore, because Seraphina would have no reason to be so protective of Nala, not with their rightful king's safe return. If Nala could somehow travel to Garamba and find Simba alive, it could change everything. Nala shook her head. It was foolish for her to even think such thoughts. She wasn't allowed to travel past the waterhole. How could she possibly think that she could make it all the way to Garamba? She didn't know the first thing about how to get there, except she did. During many of their jaunts around the Pride Lands, she and Simba had mapped out the path to Garamba. Based on information they had gathered from animals who had been there, they had determined that they were to follow the grouping of stars that looked like the mighty Abragar cattle that grazed around the savannah. As long as those stars remained straight ahead, they would take them directly to that lush jungle that they had dreamed of visiting. But that didn't mean she could get there on her own. Even if she managed to sneak away without her mother's realizing it, and then make it to Garamba, how would she find Simba there? By all accounts, Garamba was massive. It would be difficult for a fully grown lioness to get there and survive on her own. A lion cub who didn't know how to hunt would face certain death. Nala settled more securely against her mother and stared at the walls of the cave where they slept. She was safe here at Pride Rock, and if Simba was actually spotted in Garamba, there was no guarantee that he would still be there if she were to go in search of him. She could spend her life combing the entire savannah and never find him. Yes, it was best she stay right here, where she was safe. They had all adjusted to this new life on Pride Rock so far, and they would continue to do so.